Time to continue this season of giving by taking a look at another popular request from the comments. For this week's episode, we're getting down to the basics on the reckless Autobot Street Fighter, SIDESWIPE. The story of the original SIDESWIPE toy is a slightly confusing one that begins with the Japanese toy line, Diaclone. The Diaclone line included two different figures that transformed into Lamborghini Countach sports cars. 1982's Super Tuning Countach, distinguished by its rear-mounted supercharger air intakes, and 1983's New Countach, which lacked them. Both toys were imported by Hasbro to become part of the first year of the Transformers toy line in 1984, with the initial plan being to release the Super Tuning figure in red and the new figure in yellow. With this understanding, Marvel Comics writer Bob Budiansky crafted profiles for the two figures, deciding that they would be twin brothers, and naming the red one SIDESWIPE and the yellow Sunstreaker. For SIDESWIPE's profile, Budiansky invented various gadgets based on the features of the Super Tuning toy: a jetpack, shoulder-mounted flares, and the ability to convert his arms into pile drivers. However, after Budiansky had completed the profiles, Hasbro decided to swap the colours and identities of the toys around, and for the finalised toy line, released the Super Tuning figure in yellow as Sunstreaker and the new figure in red as SIDESWIPE. The profiles were swapped without alteration, meaning that SIDESWIPE was now described as possessing gadgets that had been based on the features of his brother's toy. Now, this complicated story of the character's origin is probably the most interesting thing there is to say about SIDESWIPE's role in the original Transformers series. Budiansky's profile characterized him as a rash young Autobot warrior who loved not just fighting, but fighting dirty, willing to use any underhanded tactic to come out a winner on both the battlefield and in life in general. But in terms of media, whether it was the Marvel comic or the cartoon, he was never a prominent character. He had his moments, notably lending Optimus Prime his jetpack, or alongside Sunstreaker, engaging in a mid-air jet judo battle with the Decepticon jets. But all in all, he was a pretty generic Autobot, keen to fight, quick with a quip, but not much else. SIDESWIPE's toy was discontinued in 1986, following which he was quietly phased out of the cartoon after its second season, making a few final cameos in the Japanese exclusive sequel series The Headmasters the following year. While in the comic, he was among the Autobots taken offline by a Decepticon-controlled copy of Optimus Prime. In stories exclusive to the United Kingdom's version of the comic, he had a different fate, falling victim to the out-of-control Dinobots. No further toys of SIDESWIPE were released in the United States during the original toy line, but in 1991, a brand new figure, a non-transforming Action Master, was released exclusively in Europe and Australasia, and his original toy was made available again as part of the Classics line of reissues in the same markets. The original toy was reissued again in 1993 as part of the Transformers Generation 2 toy line, with new accessories and a snazzy-looking inverted black and red colour scheme, in which form SIDESWIPE appeared in Marvel's Generation 2 comic book. At the tail end of Generation 2 in 1995, a GoBot figure of SIDESWIPE was also released, now a Lamborghini Diablo in uncharacteristic blue and yellow. SIDESWIPE's name fell into a bit of a limbo in the early 2000s as Hasbro began reusing it more or less at random in order to keep their trademark on it active, applying it to characters with little to no relation to the original. First, there was the SIDESWIPE from 2001's Robots in Disguise, a small green Camaro Autobot. Next, in 2003, there was the SIDESWIPE from Transformers Armada, a dorky, inexperienced young Autobot eager to prove himself to his superiors. As seen in the Armada cartoon, SIDESWIPE arrived on Earth in hopes of working with his idol, Autobot sniper Blur, who had once saved him from a sticky situation back on Cybertron. But Blur had no time for the klutzy, clingy bot, and instead pawned him off on his teammate Hotshot, a situation about which neither was very happy until Hotshot had to rescue SIDESWIPE from the Decepticons, after which SIDESWIPE became Hotshot's biggest fan. SIDESWIPE hit the big screen in the 2009 live-action movie Revenge of the Fallen. This sleek, agile version of the character was an eager warrior like the original, but was very different in appearance, with a silver Corvette Stingray alternate mode and a pair of arm-mounted swords. Numerous action figures of this Sideswipe were released in the various movie toy lines, and he appeared in several pieces of tie-in media, but his most memorable showings were undoubtedly in the films themselves, bisecting the Decepticon sideways with his blades, and fighting the Dreads alongside Ironhide in the 2011 sequel, Dark of the Moon. Now, the introduction of these different Sideswipes didn't mean that the original was forgotten. Despite his minimal story roles, his stylish alternate mode, the Countach, one of the most iconic supercars of the 1980s, in that signature Autobot red paint job, and his and Sunstreaker's status as some of the earliest sibling characters in Transformers lore, have proven memorable enough in their own right to earn Sideswipe a surprisingly high degree of popularity. Multiple new toys of him have been released in various toy lines in the 21st century, including several which have paid homage to his cult favourite Generation 2 colours. And he's appeared in plenty of media. Dreamwave Productions head Pat Lee considered Sideswipe to be his favourite Transformer, and the character saw a fair bit of action in Dreamwave's comics. And he was even a player character in the Transformers Devastation video game, for which original actor Michael Bell even reprised the role.
I don't break rules, I bend them. A lot.
But it was in IDW Publishing's comic books that Sideswipe's character was really explored for the first time. Having always been looked down on by the perfectionist Sunstreaker, IDW's Sideswipe was obsessed with proving himself to his brother, and to that end took on the forces of Nova Prime when they attacked the Earth. The fight helped Sideswipe let his obsession go, as he realized that he had already proved his worth to the only bot that mattered, himself. A few years later, when the war came to an end, Sideswipe served as a peacekeeper on Cybertron. But peacetime never sat well with a fighter like him, and he happily returned to Earth to help defend it against the new threat posed by Galvatron. During this time, he formed a friendship with RC, based on their mutual love of and talent for violence. Sadly, Sideswipe was fatally wounded in an attack on the Autobot's spacecraft, but RC and Sunstreaker were able to use a telepathic projector to give him one final dream of a peaceful, united Cybertron, allowing Sideswipe to die happy, knowing that everything he had spent his life fighting for had been worth it. When a new generation of Cybertronian life subsequently emerged from the planet, RC named one of the protoforms Sideswipe in her friend's honor. In the 2010s, Hasbro began reconsolidating the various depictions of Transformers characters to be more consistent across different media, and Sideswipe was no exception, with new incarnations of the character harkening back to the original. For instance, the Sideswipe of Transformers Animated, available exclusively at the official Transformers convention BotCon in 2010, was imagined as an older version of the character in Generation 2 colours, who had grown out of his reckless tendencies and become a jaded old cop. The same year, Sideswipe also featured in the War for Cybertron video game, a former racer whose recklessness had cost him his career, who had joined the Autobots for a shot at redemption. Tie-in novels depicted this Sideswipe as the pilot of the Autobot spacecraft, the Ark, and an action figure of him was released in the Transformers Generations toy line in 2013. The most notable of these new Sideswipes was the one featured in 2015's Robots in Disguise. Though notionally set in the same continuity as War for Cybertron, the Sideswipe of this series wasn't the same as the one seen in the game. Rather, he was a younger bot, an immature, thrill-seeking, smart-alecky lone wolf who was originally going to be named Fastlane, after a 1987 Autobot with a similar personality. Sideswipe's role in the Robots in Disguise cartoon began with him being arrested by police cadet Strongarm for causing a public disturbance, which in turn led to him being dragged along when Strongarm and Bumblebee headed for Earth to apprehend the Decepticon escapees of the prison ship Alchemore, which had crashed there. Sideswipe agreed to join them in the task, but his anti-authority attitude didn't make things easy. He constantly butted heads with the officious Strongarm, and got himself in all sorts of trouble, like the time his body was stolen by Decepticon Vertebrake. But as the team's adventures on Earth continued, SIDESWIPE slowly matured and learned to work with others. And he would even guest star in an episode of sister series Rescue Bots, and get a figure in that series' toy line, in addition to the many toys of him released in the Robots in Disguise line. Most recently, a new figure of SIDESWIPE has been released as part of the War for Cybertron Siege toy line, which has led to him appearing in IDW's new rebooted comic book universe as a member of Cybertron's security forces, just as eager to bust heads as ever. Based on his limited role back in the 80s, it wouldn't have been easy to predict that SIDESWIPE would become such a frequently appearing archetypal Autobot soldier today, but bending rules has always been what SIDESWIPE does best. And those are the basics on SIDESWIPE. Which one's your favourite? Make your choice in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe for more Transformers history and lore, and consider supporting the show on Patreon to get early access to new episodes.